Have you ever imagined that raising goats and sipping coffee on your own land could get you labeled as a high-resistance threat? My name is Luke Callahan, former Navy SEAL, now living quietly on 120 acres in Wyoming with my loyal dog Max and a goat named Linda, with more attitude than most people. Life was peaceful until one morning, I spotted a strange plastic sign zip-tied to my fence. Property under review, HOA compliance required. That was the beginning of hell. Karen Reynolds, self-declared president of a fake HOA, showed up with a clipboard, pastel slacks, and a plan to take control of everything. But this wasn't a neighborly dispute. This was a coordinated operation, backed by surveillance, behavior maps, fake patrols, and a federal program I unknowingly helped design over a decade ago. This isn't just a story about a ranch. It's about freedom, self-control, and what happens when you realize you're already on someone's map. Subscribe now to Real HOA Drama, because these stories are real, raw, and dangerously close to home. And who knows, you might already be on the list. My name is Luke Callahan. I'm 44, retired early, used to be a Navy SEAL. Now I live with a loyal dog named Max, a wild-eyed goat named Linda, and 120 acres of land I call my quiet heaven.
No alarms.
No bosses. No one yelling in my face at 4 a.m. Just roosters arguing in the distance and the scent of stale coffee from a machine I never clean properly. That morning, I was on my second cup of coffee, standing on the porch watching the sun drench my fields, when Max started barking. Not the someone dropped off a package bark. I smell a demon in the distance kind. I followed his lead and saw it. A white plastic sign, zip-tied to the fence by the road. Property under review. HOA compliance required. I just stood there like an idiot, coffee cooling in my hand. HOA? Here? This is Wyoming, where people ride John Deeres more than they drive Priuses. Around here, starting a homeowners association gets you looked at like you're starting a cult. No cameras. No witnesses. Just that smug little sign standing there like it was about to collect rent. I pulled it down, gently, like it might bite me. No address, no logo, just cheap ink and attitude. I walked it straight to the burn barrel out back and lit it up. Plastic crackled. I smiled. Thought it was over. I was wrong. 2 days later, a pale gray SUV, the kind that makes you think hospital before horsepower, rolled up my gravel road. Out stepped Karen Reynolds. Pastel khakis, mirrored sunglasses, and a clipboard she held like it was a loaded weapon. The kind of person who would sue you for growing your grass in the wrong direction. She didn't look at the land. She looked at me like I was a germ under a microscope. "Hi there," she chirped, all teeth and fake cheer. "I'm Karen Reynolds, president of the Simmons Valley HOA. Just wanted to personally welcome you to our friendly little community." I leaned on the fence post, glanced at Max, then back at her. "This is a ranch, not a community, and I don't recall joining any club." She smiled wider. "Scarier. We're a licensed community coordination entity. We help maintain aesthetic and environmental standards." I laughed. "Aesthetic? Out here? What's that mean, not running over a cow?" She didn't blink. "Our guidelines include fencing height, livestock ratios, shed architecture, and noise levels." She handed me a manila envelope. "Welcome packet. Action required. Before the end of the month." Before I could speak, she turned on her orthopedic heel and marched off like she'd just served a court summons. I opened it right there. Schematics of my barn, surveillance photos from angles I didn't know existed, a diagram showing that my satellite dish obstructed the southern view corridor. I didn't toss it. I burned it. But this time, I wasn't smiling. That was the moment I realized the battlefield wasn't where I'd been. It was here now, on my own land, and the enemy didn't carry guns. They carried clipboards. The next morning at 9 a.m., it was calm, sunny, and my coffee was just cool enough to drink. Max barked 3 times. I assumed squirrels. Linda was still sleeping like a queen in her pen. Then I heard it. A voice, crackling over a radio. "Copy. Visual on east fence. Suspected infraction. Rust damage, unsealed posts." I stepped onto the porch, coffee in hand, and saw them. 3 men in cheap tactical vests with iron-on HOA patrol patches, like something you'd order off Etsy for $20. They walked my fence line with clipboards, taking notes, snapping photos, measuring fence height with grocery store tape measures. I stepped down. Max ran out just enough to make them freeze. "Something I can help you with, fellas?" I said, voice calm but carrying weight. One guy, maybe mid-30s with a buzz cut, narrowed his eyes like he was reciting a script. "We're conducting a compliance sweep under Simmons Valley HOA regulation. This is part of the Alpha Zone review." I raised my cup. I'm not part of any HOA. And Alpha sounds more like a military strike team than a neighborhood watch. Another chimed in, robotic as a DMV clerk. "Under Community Charter 14B, we're authorized to assess properties within jurisdictional oversight." I took one step closer. "Listen closely. You're on my land.
No warrant.
No authority. Turn around and leave, or I'll consider this intentional trespassing." They hesitated, then turned as one and walked off like soldiers under retreat orders.
But one dropped something.
A clipboard. I picked it up, and what I saw made my stomach turn cold. A hand-drawn but precise tactical map of the area. My ranch, marked in red, labeled Alpha, High Resistance. Other properties nearby were marked with circles, XS, labels like C2, compliant, P1, pending pressure, yay, exit achieved. I wasn't just being watched. I was being classified. This wasn't about property lines. This was a campaign. A plan. I called my old military buddy, Sheriff Mike Langston. He picked up after 2 rings. "Let me guess, Karen again?" he sighed before I said a word. I filled him in clipboard, patrols, maps, military lingo. He exhaled, deep and tired. "She once filed a noise complaint against the local feed store," he said. "I used to think she was just another HOA nut. But if they're labeling people by resistance level, we've got a real problem." That's when I knew.
They weren't trying to make me comply.
They were preparing for a war. And I had just been marked as enemy number 1. 4:12 a.m. Pitch black. No wind.
No roosters.
Not even Linda, the grumpy queen of the goat pen, was awake. She lay with her head on the hay trough like Victorian royalty in deep slumber. I was in the kitchen, holding a mug of yesterday's coffee, eyes locked on the east-facing window. I didn't see anything, but I knew. Something was off. Max, my dog who's smarter than half the guys I served with, stood by the door, bristling, growling like he just remembered Fallujah. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not the scurry of chickens or squirrels. Not the rumble of a truck. Boots on gravel. Trying to be quiet, but too synchronized, too trained. I moved on instinct. Threw on my old field coat with the emergency light trigger in the pocket. No gun. Not yet. I checked the barn cam, and there they were. 5 figures. Khakis. Headlamps like miners. Radios. Bluetooth earpieces. And, of course, clipboards. One guy holding his like he was about to lead an 8 a.m. team huddle in the Amazon. 3 of them peeled off toward the goat pen. 2 lingered by the main gate. Then came the radio crackle. Team Alpha in position. Begin sweep. Target is presumed armed but compliant. Phase 1. I almost spit out my coffee. Presumed armed but compliant. Who wrote this script? Tom Clancy or some Reddit conspiracy addict? I didn't wait. Stepped out onto the porch. Hit the trigger.
Boom.
Floodlights lit up the yard like I'd summoned the wrath of God. Sirens wailed from 4 corners of the ranch. 2 of the guys hit the dirt like they'd been shelled. One poor soul stumbled into Linda's pen. Bad move. Linda, jolted from her royal nap, launched up like a Marine who just had coffee dumped in his boots. Headbutt him in the thigh. Flipped him straight over the water trough. Then stood over him, hoof squared, like a Viking war maiden asking, "You good, bro?" I stepped onto the porch. No yelling.
No rush.
Just sipped my cold, bitter coffee and said, "Good morning, gentlemen. Were you planning to announce yourselves, or just hoping for the element of surprise?" Clipboard guy scrambled to his feet, dirt on his pants and ego. We're acting under HOA Emergency Code 7A to seize non-compliant property, he said, like he was arresting shoplifters at Target. I tilted my head. Y'all make that up in a coloring book? Another one, shaking, pulled out something that looked like a dollar store taser. This is a citizens enforcement zone. We are within operational bounds. I stepped down one rung. You're on my land, with fake laws, fake vests, and real stupid. You're lucky Linda didn't sharpen her horns this week. And just like that, I got it. This wasn't HOA cosplay anymore. This was a coordinated op. They didn't come to scare me. They came to control me. And me? I just graduated from that weird ranch guy to primary resistance target. Only difference is, I've got floodlights, alarms, a war goat, and a past those clipboard cowboys can't even begin to imagine. That afternoon, the sky hung lower than usual.
Gray.
Heavy. The kind of day where even the wind whispers. Max lay quietly on the porch, head resting on my boot. Cold coffee in hand, I was staring at something that felt heavier than any mission I'd ever run. A letter. From Karen. Not with her usual smug tone, or fake friendliness. This time it was legal, well, HOA legal. Notice of litigation for obstruction, incitement, and interference with community enforcement. Sounded like I'd ruined a picnic, not exposed a criminal syndicate. But what froze me cold was the attachment. A list. Labeled. Active informants. My eyes scanned line by line. And then I saw it. Ethan Colburn. The guy who helped me build the goat pen in 100-degree heat. The guy who drank beer with me in the barn and joked about HOA flyers being the new seasonal flu. The guy I knew would have had my back. If this ever got real. I didn't sleep that night. Just waited. And sure enough, Max was right again. Ethan showed. His old pickup rolled up slow, stopped 10 yards from the porch. No honk. No call. He got out like a man walking into a funeral. I said nothing. Arms crossed. Eyes locked. Luke, his voice cracked like gravel under pressure. I guess you know. I held up the letter.
Didn't speak. Didn't yell.
Just looked. Ethan dropped his eyes.
No excuses.
No denial. Just one sentence. And it hit harder than any betrayal could. She said if I didn't help, I'd be next. And that's when it all clicked. This wasn't an HOA. This was a fear-based machine. Karen didn't control people with bullets. She used isolation. She turned neighbors into enforcers, threats into policies, and trust into suspicion. Ethan didn't sell me out for money.
He sold me out to survive.
And somehow, I couldn't even be mad. I just hurt. I nodded. Not to forgive, but to acknowledge. Because in this war, there are no front lines. Only blurred loyalties and quiet breakdowns. When fear becomes the battlefield, betrayal doesn't come from behind. It walks right up, looks you in the eye, and shakes your hand. And Karen? She doesn't need to swing a punch. Because we were already destroying each other for her. Karen didn't show up the usual way. No smug smile. No spotless khakis. No clipboard. No lapel mic. No henchman. Just her. Alone. Holding a manila envelope like it weighed more than it should. And for the first time since this whole thing began, she didn't say a word. No, we're just here to maintain community aesthetics. No fake cheer. She handed me the file, looked me dead in the eye, and said it like a sentence being read aloud. You've kicked something you don't understand. Then she turned and walked away, quiet, like a storm that's not done yet. I stood there, Max growling low beside me, Linda watching from the distance like she was evaluating the envelope's threat level. I brought it inside, set it on the kitchen table. Didn't open it.
Not yet.
Just looked at it, this lifeless object that somehow felt heavier than any bullet I'd ever carried. The label read, OPRM, Operational Rural Management, Phase 2. Stamped with a raised federal seal.
Real.
Not something printed at the UPS store. When I finally opened it, it hit like a sandbag to the chest. Page 1 confirmed everything I'd feared, but never dared say out loud. Test site, Simmons Valley. Node ID, Alpha, primary resistance. Subject, Luke Callahan, classification, autonomous, strategic risk. I laughed, but not the kind that reaches your eyes. It was the laugh of someone who just realized I wasn't being monitored. I was the experiment. I called Sheriff Mike Langston, told him to come, fast. He walked in, saw my face, and didn't ask questions. I handed him the file, pointed to the seal. He flipped page after page in silence, the kind of silence that feels like a bomb ticking in your chest. When he finished, he placed the file down, exhaled slowly, then nodded. It's real, Luke. I've seen files like this back when I worked with DHS. This didn't come from Office Depot. I sank into my chair, like all those years fighting wars overseas hadn't prepared me for this one, being hunted by the very system I once served. Langston scanned the list of names tagged in the file.
Not just me.
6 others. Each labeled a community activation node. Each classified like a threat matrix. I brewed a fresh cup of coffee. Black, bitter, and barely able to cut through the weight. So this isn't an HOA, I said, more to myself than to him. Langston shook his head.
No.
This is part of something bigger. A campaign. A behavioral program. And Luke, he paused, looked at me like I was a live grenade. You're the central link. I used to think I was dealing with a power-hungry woman with too much time. But now I knew. I was standing dead center in a federally backed social control program. And my name was the first one typed into the playbook. That night, I slept less than usual. Not because of the caffeine, because of the feeling. The one in your bones. The one that never fully leaves when you've worn the uniform. Even Max was restless. Didn't sleep at my feet like always. He paced around the goat pen, ears high, tail stiff. Like he could hear something I couldn't. I thought maybe a coyote. Or a raccoon. Max usually handles that like a pro. Then I heard it. Not loud. Not sharp. But unmistakably human. A whimper. A muffled cry. I rushed outside with my flashlight. Found Max next to the ATV, curled up, one paw lifted, shaking. He whimpered when I touched it. Blood oozed between his toes. And when I lifted the paw, I saw it, a shard of broken glass, jammed into his flesh. My fists clenched tight, knuckles white. The goat pen. The glass. The timing. This wasn't an accident. It was a message. I cradled Max in my arms. Whispered, "It's okay, buddy. I've got you. I swear." I laid him gently in the back seat of the truck, bandaged the wound with an old shirt, then went back to the scene. 12 shards. Olive green and amber, beer bottle glass. Cut deliberately. Hidden deep in the straw near the back gate. A trap. Not for me. For Max. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. I wasn't just the guy trying to be left alone on his land. I wasn't a retired soldier pushing back against HOA nonsense. I became what I used to be, a strategist, a fighter, a man who knows how to plan and win. That night, I didn't sleep. I fortified. Infrared cams on the barn roof and tree line. Motion sensors along the east and south fences. Steel barriers rigged to rise from the ground, remote activated. Directional flash strobes, meant to blind and disorient. And my favorite, an underground tripwire linked to a tactical siren I once used to protect gear from insurgents in Afghanistan. I turned my ranch from private property into a perimetered war zone. Not out of fear. Out of clarity. Because I knew there'd be a next time. When you hurt a dog, a loyal one who guards, who doesn't lie, you don't just hurt the animal. You cut into the soul of the man who raised him. And me, I'm not going to cry on the porch. I'm going to rise.
And fight.
Not for vengeance, but to let them know. Blood on this land, whether man or mutt, won't be spilled in vain. The email came in at midnight. No subject. No greeting. Just one line, signed with 2 letters. Stop looking outside. You already built it. AW. I read it once. Then again. First came suspicion. Then came the memories layer by layer, sweeping in like a sandstorm through a vault I thought I'd sealed shut. Ava Walker. A name I hadn't spoken out loud in nearly 10 years. The first woman, maybe the only one, who understood both the light and the shadow in me. We met during a post-conflict intelligence project. I was the strategic advisor. She was the behavioral analyst. We dreamed of building a proactive community framework to help rural towns recover after disaster. And then I wrote the original proposal. Codename, Rural Behavioral Management.
Target.
I left. Ava didn't. She stayed until staying became impossible. At 3 a.m., a file package arrived. Encrypted. Password included. With a single note. This is bigger than Karen. It always was. I downloaded it. Audio recordings. Drone footage. Conversations caught from a mic planted near my goat pen. And worst of all, slides detailing my behavioral patterns, daily routines, emotional responses week by week. I wasn't just a target. I was the blueprint, a live behavioral prototype, as one PDF file called me. And the cruelest twist? Most of their assessment metrics were based on my own strategic recommendations, written 12 years ago. I was being controlled by the very system I helped create. Then the screen changed. Me, feeding Max at 5:06 a.m. Me, talking to Langston on the phone with audio. Me, reading in my living room, captured by an infrared camera from hundreds of yards away. I sank back into my chair, gripping the mouse, so tight I nearly cracked the plastic. And then one last file opened.
Ava.
Looking straight into the camera. No uniform. No analyst persona. Just a woman, tired, but clear-eyed. Luke, if you're seeing this, it means it's gone too far. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried weight. I believed RBM would help stabilize communities, prevent the chaos that comes after conflict. But they didn't use it to heal. They used it to control. She paused. And they picked you because you were the perfect test subject. Self-reliant.
Smart.
Unpredictable. Dangerous, if not obedient. The video cut to black. And a final line appeared. You can't fight what you don't understand.
So now understand it.
Then end it. I didn't get angry. Didn't panic. I just sat there. Heavy. Because this wasn't a war against Karen anymore. This was atonement for the mistakes I helped build. And Ava, the woman in the shadows, just handed me the key to fix them. There was only one question left. Did I have the guts to open that final door? The hard drive had no logo, no label, no serial, just one word, scrawled in black Sharpie. Callahan. No instructions, no password, just a cold, heavy object that felt more like a confession than a device. I left it on my kitchen table for 2 days. Just stared at it, imagining what was inside. Langston stopped by, saw it unopened, asked, "What are you afraid of?" I answered without hesitation. Not what's in it. What it'll wake up in me once I read it. But eventually, silence is no longer an option. I plugged it in. The screen blinked. A logo appeared. OPRM, Operational Rural Management. I nearly laughed. The program I once sketched on a whiteboard in a freezing DC conference room, now fully operational, and hunting me for folders. Phase 1, infiltration. Phase 2, conditioning. Phase 3, pressure. Phase 4, correction. I opened each one.
Slides.
Audio logs. Behavior charts. Even surveillance video of me. From drones. From sensors. From heat cams. Every action. Every time I woke up. Every forgotten porch light.
Logged. Tracked.
Analyzed. My profile tag. Subject, Callahan autonomous. Disruptive. Strategic influence. Then came the final file. A video. I clicked. Karen Reynolds. Sitting against a blank backdrop. Wearing a blazer like she was filming a life insurance ad. But her voice was sharp as a blade. If you're watching this, congratulations. You made it through 3 phases of control. You're exactly what we needed to study. You think this is about goats.
About land.
About an HOA. You're wrong. We didn't come after you because you're dangerous. We came after you because you're the prototype. She smiled. The kind of smile that makes you want to unplug the entire internet. You built this. The framework. The logic. The strategy for post-conflict community reformation. We just tuned it. Karen wasn't the architect. I was just the clipboard. You wrote the symphony. We played the notes. The screen went black. And I just sat there, in my kitchen, with only the hum of the hard drive to remind me that guilt can be digitized. I used to believe the system I designed would help people reintegrate after war. But turns out they weaponized it. Against people like me. The ones who don't submit. I wasn't just a victim. I was the engineer of the cage. And now, I was the only one who could tear it down. Not for redemption, but because if I didn't, there'd be another Callahan out there, being hunted by a twisted version of a good idea. It was still dark. The kind of dark that swallows up the sky. The wind wasn't even breathing. Max growled low beside the window like he could hear something human ears weren't built for. I had just poured a cup of coffee when the west-facing camera flickered, and my heart skipped a beat. 3 figures. Full black tactical gear. No flashlights. No insignia. Real weapons. AR-15s. Safety off. Eyes like steel. This wasn't cosplay, HOA anymore. This was a real unit. I checked the system. Sensors were hot. Steel barriers primed. Flashbangs charged. The directional sound system, something I hadn't touched since Kandahar, was ready to fire. I wasn't afraid. I was back in combat mode. They moved in 3-man formation. 2 flanked wide. The center, clipboard in hand, raised a sheet of paper like it was the Constitution. Mr. Callahan, he barked through gritted teeth, you failed to comply. Under Clause B9, your property is now subject to seizure. I stepped out onto the porch, coffee still steaming in my hand. Clause B9. I said, that from the back of your cereal box or your cult manual? No one laughed. The guy on the left raised his rifle. Big mistake. I tapped my watch. PSSSSHHK. Steel barriers shot up from the earth like a mechanical beast bearing its fangs. Red and white strobe lights pulsed like lightning in a thunderstorm. Then came the sound, a frequency so unnatural it hit your skull before your ears. Like a chorus of dying machines screaming through the trees. Flashbangs detonated. No shrapnel. Just pure shock. All 3 men went down. One scrambled for the perimeter. I dropped low, sprinted right. Twisted the wrist of the guy on the flank, shoulder slammed him into the dirt. SEAL technique. The middle one fumbled for his belt. I kicked his weapon clean. That's when the sirens cut through it all. Sheriff Langston's cruiser skidded to a stop. Door flung open. He stepped out with real authority, real badge, real gun. Weapons down. Dropped the damn clipboard. The last one, pale, shaking, obeyed. Langston's team detained 7 total. Some emerged from the tree line, reinforcements. One had a patch. Enforcement Tier 4, Phase 4 certified. Langston gave me a look like steel meeting stone. These aren't randoms, Luke. One of them used to work at the Pentagon. I recognize his face. I stood there, Max beside me. Linda bleated in the distance like a pissed-off foghorn. The breeze moved through the grass, carrying the smell of flash powder and upturned soil. The fight was over. I didn't win because I was stronger. I won because I knew where this started. Because I was there when it was first written on a whiteboard. Now, I'm going to clean the board. Line by line. File by file. Name by name. Karen threw a paramilitary unit at me. I threw back a crazy goat, a few Cold War leftovers, and a former SEAL with nothing left to lose. And I'd do it again. If Phase 5 comes knocking, I'll redraw the map myself. I sat in my office. Max at my feet, his bandages still fresh, but his eyes at peace. Linda was chewing hay like she hadn't rammed a grown man off his feet a few days ago. On the desk, the final hard drive. Karen's lawsuit. Every bite Ava had sent me. I spent the whole night scrubbing names, sorting data, organizing it by phase. Then I hit upload. The entire OPRM network, Every control phase, every manipulation model, Karen's video, the behavior maps went live. I attached a cover letter to the Federal Oversight Office, titled, "When the HOA Thinks They're the NSA." The internet exploded in less than 48 hours. News outlets ran national segments. Hashtag Phase 4 started trending. Whistleblowers came forward. Congress called hearings. Karen? Indicted. Not one charge, 5 federal counts. No smile. No clipboard. Just a jumpsuit and silence, like a final exam she'd already failed. OPRM? Disbanded. No more funding. No more license. Just shame and shredded credibility left behind. I should have felt relief. But then another email. No sender. No subject. Just one line. Reassignment, pilot zone, Midwest beta. No threats. No fanfare. But I knew what it meant. The program wasn't dead. It just moved. That night, I sat on the porch. The world was quiet. Max curled against my boots. Linda, breathing slow. I looked across the field, where I'd driven every post by hand, where every fence had a story behind it. And I thought about the people in Midwest Beta. Folks who just want to raise chickens, teach their kids, lives small. People like I used to be. I reached into my pocket and unfolded the scrap of paper I'd written months ago, then whispered it into the wind. If the map already has you, don't wait to fight. They already picked your coordinates. The map doesn't need you to believe in it. It just needs you to stop looking up. Because once you realize your life is being steered by someone else's chart, you have 2 choices. Become a data point, or become the one who burns the map. I chose the second. And if they think it ends in Wyoming, then they've never seen what I got planned for Phase 5. No one is above the law. But no one should live beneath invisible control. This isn't just a story about a former SEAL standing up to a group of clipboard warriors in khaki. It's a warning, a wake-up call, about a new kind of power. The kind that doesn't need a badge, doesn't need a prison, doesn't need a gun. Just data, classification,
And a social map you never see.
Luke Callahan didn't fight to save a goat shed or protect a wooden gate. He fought for something more basic. The right to live truthfully. The right to say no. The right not to be a row in someone else's behavioral spreadsheet. Because freedom isn't a flag. It's the ability to live without fear of surveillance. Without being boxed for being different. Without being exiled for not complying. This story doesn't end in Simmons Valley. It doesn't end with Karen. Or with one hard drive.
It spreads.
Because every town is being mapped. Every deviation flagged. And if you think you're not the target, look at the map. You might have been tagged a long time ago,